Hello, welcome to Image Bearers. My name is Otoma Edje. I'm very excited to have on the program today Gilbert Kimeng. He has been in Lagos right now, Nigeria, which is where he is right now. So we have kind of like an international podcast today. He's been there for 11 years. He has been appointed as a teacher, so it's coming up on right around 3 years right now. And also joining us today is Joey Harris. Just had a chance to meet him probably a week ago. And he's right now in Augusta, Georgia, here in the United States. And he's also a teacher. So today is a day for me to grow in wisdom as I hang out with some awesome men of God who are teaching the Bible to us in a great way. So again, welcome to the program, Gilbert.
Thank you so much, Otoma. It's such an honor to be invited and to spend this time with you. Thank you. I look forward to the time.
Amen. Joey, again, thanks for taking time to join us today also.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Amen. Well, I wanted to have this episode because I feel like, here in the United States, there's kind of a little bit of a fatigue, in my opinion, of talking about race. And, obviously the Christian life is not only about that. There are other aspects of the Christian life. But I do feel like getting an additional perspective, from yourself about some of the cultural challenges and victories that you've seen, it can be very helpful to disciples in the United States and around the world. So today's episode is basically entitled Cultural Competency, Lessons from Africa. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to learn from you, from your experiences, about what you've seen in Africa that can help us here in the United States. So thanks so much again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're going to go ahead and dive right in. Joe, you want to take it away?
Sure. So Gilbert, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about how you became a disciple in the first place.
Wow. I always have to look for a short version of that story. But I was at the time when I was baptized, I was a student. I was born in Cameroon, which is in Central Africa. Yeah. And Joey, we have a connection with Cameroon. I know you were in Cameroon when you were 4 years old or so in Yaoundé, right?
Yeah, first few years of my life, yeah. And my brother was born in Yaoundé.
Oh, that's amazing. So that's already a connection point right there between Joey and myself. And so I was born there, but I had a government scholarship to go study engineering. They called it electrotechnique. In Germany, basically. So I was in Germany, having studied the language. I was now in Berlin, in the Technical University of Berlin. Right deep into the studies when I got diagnosed with cancer. So I became a disciple while dealing with cancer. I spent 10 months from February 92 to December 92. I was in hospital, and I was met by one of my doctors, Dr. Microculture, who had been converted in Boston when he was doing some cancer research stuff in MIT. And he came back to Berlin when the church just started. So I became a disciple around the first year. The church had been around for just about a year in Berlin. But I was converted in hospital. He met me in hospital. And I studied the Bible in hospital. Before he met me, I had some exposure. I was from a Catholic background. I had some exposure with Jehovah's Witness guys who were visiting me and sharing a lot of stuff with me, which I found very intriguing for a patient who sits around day in, day out. I found it really interesting to read some of the watchtowers, which are very scientific based. But for a Catholic, I found a lot of new things I was learning. But before I knew, I was caught up in this situation where I wanted to actually become a true Christian, but I was caught up with the whole blood transfusion teaching of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So my encounter with this doctor was because I decided to, I told the doctors I want to stop receiving blood. I was going to refuse blood transfusion. And then he stepped in from the medical team to talk to me from a spiritual perspective. And he ended up using Matthew 12, the story of Jesus and the Pharisees. The disciples had eaten some grains on Sabbath day, and what Jesus told them that it was lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So with that scripture, it was able to really help enlighten me. And I changed my decision, studied the Bible for the next 3 weeks, and got baptized while still in hospital. In fact, I got into a bone marrow transplant session after my baptism, which was quite intense. So it's a long story, but maybe that's enough for now.
And what were some of the differences you saw when you began speaking with that doctor versus your Catholic and Jehovah's Witness experience? What were some of the things that you noticed that were different? What made you actually pursue that instead?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, the first thing that stood out for me is when he told me he was a Christian at some point in our conversation. In my heart, I didn't tell him, but in my heart, because I'd already had interactions with him for a couple of weeks, in my heart, my attitude was, if this is what it means to be a Christian, I want to be, this version of Christianity is what I want. So his lifestyle, his person attracted me and made me want to listen to him.
Wow. That's actually very inspiring, even just to hear that. So moving on to teaching, you became a disciple. What inspired you to want to become a teacher?
Wow. Well, starting from my conversion story already, you see that the right biblical interpretation was key to me being snatched out of this false doctrine. So that plays a big role in saving souls from false doctrine. That already was a prerequisite, in addition to the fact that I love to study. I'm more of the guy who likes to understand the why behind things, the why behind the how or the what. Is just who I am as a person. I majored in stuff like chemistry, math, physics in school. You just want to go deep, you want to understand things better. And so that combination of my person and my conversion story culminated in me just loving to read stuff. So I look back now as a young Christian, it looks like I used to read some very deep books. People feel like, wow, you're a young Christian, you're reading this. I mean, Nachfolge by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I read it in hospital. I don't know how to call it in English. I know the German title, Nachfolge, which is like discipleship, I think.
That's what it's called in English.
Okay, great. So a book that really got me also very early on it's almost like a doctorate thesis by a guy. What's his name again? How can I forget his name? But the title was, it was a question: have atheists proven that there is no God? And it was a doctorate thesis that got transformed into a book. It helped me because I was dealing with cancer and wrestling with the whole question of where is God with all the suffering that's going on? Back then, there was war in Yugoslavia in the early 90s, a lot of refugees pouring into Germany. There was a famine in Ethiopia. I was dealing with cancer as a 20-year-old. There was just so much going on. And reading that book, it was a deep book that really helped me to sort of the deep questions I was asking. So I'll say reading is something I love. So when you combine my conversion story with reading and all of that, it gave birth to me naturally tending towards teaching and exposure to people like Joey, whom I met later on in my journey. Before Joey, there were people like Sam Lang who taught some really great lessons. So I used to listen to his tapes, read some of his books. And when I started teaching some of that material in the ministries I was leading, I saw the impact, I saw the depth that it brought to the life of Christians. So I fell in love with teaching.
Amen. Yeah, we share that as well, love of reading and love of ideas.
Long beards too. But
yeah,
I'm yet to pick that up. Yeah,
I might have misspoke. I think that book you're talking about is probably what's translated in English as The Cost of Discipleship.
That's it. That's
yes,
the cost of discipleship. Correct.
Yeah, excellent book. He wrote another book, which I recommend to you if you haven't read it already, which I don't know what it was in German, but in English, it's usually translated as Life Together. And it's about community about living in community and essentially being a church. So it's a
Wow.
very good book and written in his all or nothing kind of style.
Wow. That's right.
And it's
That
very
just
small,
hit.
it's very small, but very deep. So it's one of those ones where not a lot of pages, but it will take you a while to get through.
Wow.
If you're really
Thanks
reading
for
it,
that.
and, thinking about it.
Thanks for
The
that.
next question is more of a cultural question. So this is the first of several cultural questions. So what are some of the differences that you've seen? And I know that you've taught internationally, you've taught all over Africa, all over the continent, in South Africa, East Africa, where you just came back from, extensively in West and Central Africa. So you've really taught all over the continent. And I know you've also done a fair bit of teaching in the United States, both in visits and virtually. So what are some of the differences that you've noticed? I'm going to start with Africa and then move to the United States. So starting with Africa, what are some of the differences that you've noticed between African countries that have been colonized by the French as opposed to those that were colonized by the English? And Otoma, just so you know, Cameroon is both. So Cameroon is English and French. So even just from growing up, you already were experiencing that. And then, of course, in your travels, what are some of the cultural differences that you've seen? And isn't a broad sense.
That's a great question. Thanks for that. So the first thing is talking about colonization, because in the case of Africa, it's the impact of the French, and the English when they colonized. So you see the impact of that. So the French, they used assimilation, where they expect you to talk like them, to eat like them, to dress like them. So basically, the colonies are an extension of the French territory. That's how the French colonized. And so you will see that in all these places, Brazzaville, the people in Brazzaville, I went with Jacoby to Brazzaville 3 years ago. We sat at the side of River Congo and had a meal in a restaurant. And Jacoby said he was feeling like he was in France or in Europe or somewhere, you find that it's like there's a template that you find in all French countries. Just coming back from Burundi recently, I found the same template, maybe in infrastructure, in government. So they reproduce France in all those places in a way, in the restaurants, in the way the city is structured, and there's just so much of that. So assimilation is a major thing with the French form of colonization, as against the English, who will come looking for whatever they want to get in the territories, like be it in West Africa or in Kenya, in the places that the English colonized. They left some of their culture there. Kenyans love tea, just like the British do, But you find that they will allow the locals to keep their culture and their identity. They even allow the locals to own their own land. But the French will not. The French will see the land as French territory, okay? But the English will allow the locals to own land, to keep their culture and their identity, So those two major approaches to colonization do have an effect in what we see today. I'll find, for example, that even in the church, having served in French-speaking Africa, people might not realize it when they're there, but the privilege I've had is that I've been there and I've been able to live in Nigeria for 11 years. There's a tendency to be very bureaucratic in leadership style, for example, which is very French, very, process and, hierarchy and all. It's very French.
Yes.
But they also have the other good sides of it is the culture. The French love sports, they love knowledge, a balanced life. So those are some good things I've taken away from my time in Abidjan that I still maintain here. So there's that balance that you find. Whereas in English-speaking world, people tend to, even in leadership style, for example, they tend to encourage more of personal initiative. I'm, for example, a freelance teacher, right? But here, I get a lot of room to still influence and serve, which will be a bit difficult in those more structured French bureaucratic leadership styles. So
Yes.
I see those differences. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true. And I used to think that the British were big on bureaucracy, but that wasn't that was until I encountered French bureaucracy. I have nothing on them.
There you go. It takes two to compare.
So to kind of summarize the major difference, so the English came in as far as colonization. The English tended to come in and just exploit, and in the process, accidentally left a little bit of their culture behind. And even that was mostly to benefit. It was more that the British were bringing their culture with them to benefit themselves while they were there, and it spilled over onto the people around them. Or was necessary to teach them enough culture to provide the British with the culture that to which they were accustomed. Whereas the French colonized by extending France into other parts of the world. And so the French territories and French colonies were mentally thought of as parts of France. As a matter of fact, they are. That is how the French think of them. They are France. They're often French citizens, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And so they actually exported their culture, not just the language, but all the culture that came along with it, including styles and bureaucracy and the things that they like, love of literature, love of food,
music,
all those kinds of typical and stereotypical aspects of French culture. They on purpose exported that. So so that's good. That's very helpful.
Does that remind you somehow of Alexander the Great? That's similar with the Greek culture.
Exactly. That's like Alexander the Great, where he exported Greek culture, and language for that reason. Yeah, good. That's a very helpful way to think of it. And there was another part to that question. So with that in mind, with that description that you just gave, how does that spill over into the way that the churches or into church cultures and individuals from French and English colonized Africa? How does any of that spill over and get into the way that the churches think and act, church cultures?
It definitely
we're talking about our churches, of course. Correct.
I mean, I think I mentioned one I mentioned earlier on was maybe the leadership style, which I really connect with, having served on the church staff in Abidjan across French-speaking Africa. So I do see quite a difference in the leadership style. In English Africa, I feel like personal initiative is really encouraged, whereas in the French, it's more of the bureaucracy and there's a
more
hierarchy. So even when I'm visiting the churches, when it's the French churches, I got to make sure I find a way to talk to the main leader, because if you speak to somebody else and you don't speak to the main leader, they might feel slighted, not because they have a problem with you, but it's just the way the culture trains people to think, right? Mm-hmm. So I take some of that, things into consideration when I interact. It applies to that. It applies to many other areas. I think leadership style is just one of many other areas where we could just, So
what about the way that individuals think and the way that they interact within a church culture?
Yes, the way
you mentioned one a little while back, Gilbert, which is, I think you mentioned this would likely be for French culture, where in the early days of the church, everyone used to have suits and ties. This was basically like, coming down from leadership, and amen, it is what it is. But this was like just a very rigid way that, kind of things came down. So I think that's one example.
Absolute dressing style. So for example, I remember going to Brazzaville with Emmanuel Edje, who is one of the teachers here in Nigeria. And I told him that, look, the French are very serious about their suits, right? So in Nigeria, I only wear suits when I go to the office. I've worked in the corporate world, telecom, IT industry. So I wear suits for office function. I remember when I was dating my wife, and I showed up on a weekend in a suit, she asked me, "Are you going to the office?" So, because in Nigeria, people love to portray more of the African wear across most of English West Africa. But then in French countries, in spite of the heat, you find people still suiting up, which is very French. So, Otoma,
Yes.
a bit to your point. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's family is from Haiti, and same thing. You see people, dressed up and suits and tie, and it's hot and humid. It's crazy weather. That's not meant for that kind of attire. But still,
Correct.
and especially, of course, on Sunday. I mean,
Especially on Sunday.
dressed,
Yeah.
yes. Shoes
Exactly.
shined, everything.
Oh, come on, man.
French
Come on,
culture,
man.
yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
This is a multinational cultural competency question. So, in your opinion, and of course, this is generalization, and this is just an opinion.
Yeah.
Not trying to get you in trouble, though you will be. So, in your
Thank you
opinion,
for that. Thanks for protecting me.
what are some of the differences in culture that you've noticed between East Africans and West Africans, or specifically, for example, Kenyans and Tanzanians versus Nigerians and Ghanaians?
Oh, this is very specific, very interesting.
Now, of course,
specific.
that's not. This is generally, because we're not even getting into tribes yet. So this is just
that's right.
Even
at that
bigger.
level. So the first thing I'd like to say, thanks for the question, is when my wife and I traveled to East Africa for the first time, 2018, we're invited to speak at the singles conference, all the singles across the 6 countries where we have churches. They came together in Kenya, in Kisumu, west of Kenya, very close to Obama's father's village. I noticed immediately, having visited, during that trip, we visited Kenya and Tanzania. Those are the 2 countries. And so those are the 2 examples you cited from East Africa. It became obvious to us that Kenyans are the Nigerians of East Africa, whereas Tanzanians are the Ghanaians of East Africa. So what I mean by that is Nigerians in West Africa are known to be very aggressive, very assertive, if I want to say it in a more polished way, and also, very, very ambitious and loud, and Nigeria will make his presence felt anywhere they go, right? And so Ghanaians are more the quieter types. They're more reserved, And so I've had an encounter with a really top corporate woman who was leading one of the top telecom companies in Ghana. And when I met her, she thought I was coming from Congo because the friend who introduced me to her, they met in Congo when she was working in Congo. When she discovered I was a Nigerian, maybe she had already trusted me enough and known me enough to now open up and say, look, this is the impression we have of Nigerians. We feel like if at the job site, they feel like they know everything. They want to take over everything. They are loud, they are aggressive. I just sat there, I thought, wow, And so, but Ghanaians are the quieter types. So the same applies to Kenyans being the louder. In Tanzania, I noticed that some of the best jobs in Tanzania are actually run by Kenyans. And that's similar with Nigerians doing that all across, not just in West Africa, around the world, you find Nigerians
around the world, yes. Sure.
Right? Yeah. So those are 2 major differences about those 2 groups.
Okay, now getting into a more granular level and closer to home. So in Nigeria, what are some of the cultural differences that you've noticed between the 3 main tribal groups, the Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa? And,
oh, wow. Yeah.
and along with that, what kind of accommodations and cultural shifts did you have to undergo in your own self when you moved to Nigeria?
Oh boy, big one. Thanks for that. Oh boy. If I thought I had some cultural competency, coming to Nigeria was a big test for me. Yeah, definitely. So starting with the 3 tribes. So the Hausas, and you will notice that across most of Africa, and especially the coastal African like West African countries. If you start from Cameroon, they just take Cameroon, Nigeria, Togo, Benin, Ghana, Ivory Coast in that order, all the way to Senegal, which is at the far western side. You notice that mostly in the northern parts of those countries, you will find nomadic tribes. Those are the Hausas happen to be those nomadic tribes. They're constantly on the move. They're the ones who rear cattle. And then from a religion perspective, mostly Muslim, right? So you, what I'll describe them as, they have a very simple lifestyle. They don't hold on to things. They don't stay in one place. They're on the go, and they're simple. They're down to earth. That's what I like to describe them in a few words. There's a lot more I could say about them, but then if I take the Yoruba, which is where I am in Lagos, this is Yoruba land. One of the big things that characterizes the Yoruba culture is respect for the elder. Older people must be respected. And the respect is so intense that people literally bow down when they see an elder. You find women going down on their knees, you know, there's some body language, some posture that you have to, you know, maintain or show in the face of an elder when you meet an elder, you know. And so that's a big part of the Yoruba culture. If I take the Igbos, I would say the Igbos are more, they have this business acumen. They are very good with their entrepreneurship. They're good at making money. They're very enterprising. They're the ones who go everywhere and they can adapt to anything. They're also very good with education. We have some of the best writers. Is it one of the, you know, writers and all kinds of walks of life. They're very educated, tend to be very educated. They tend to excel in whatever they put their hands on. And so that characterizes, so they're not so much of the elder respect, even though there are aspects of that in their culture, but it's more of excellence, competency in business, in education, in whatever field. So that's what characterizes them. That's what I would describe those two.
And so what were the things that you had to get most used to when you moved to Lagos?
Oh boy, for me, the big one was the respect. You know, I generally, from my upbringing, I love to respect people. I love to show respect. Yes. But in Nigeria, it is expected that you show the respect in a particular way. Okay, you show up to functions. You say thank you to everything that's done. There's a particular form in which the respect it should be exhibited in a particular way. So for me, when I didn't exhibit it in the way it was expected, I ran into trouble.
It was taken as disrespect.
It was taken as disrespect. So I was treated as arrogant and disrespectful, and I've had some really intense experiences with elderly people, even in the church, in my early days, and that brought a lot of clash and misunderstanding. But I quickly had to learn that, hey, Michael Burns will tell you there is a dominant culture and there's a non-dominant culture. So I quickly had to be smart enough to understand that if I'm going to live in Nigeria, married to a Nigerian, I got to understand that this is the dominant culture and I got to submit. So I learned that early on. It was tough. It didn't come naturally, but I learned that. And over time, I've kind of like learned to strike the balance. But the respect for elders was the big one for me. Food was challenging because there's pepper in everything, hot pepper. It dominates everything you eat, you know. And so the early first year, my tummy will run after almost every meal. You know, so food was a big challenge for me. And then learning to live in a city of 22 million people minimum.
Yeah, it's a huge city. It's wow.
Man, everything is on the go. You got to be aggressive. You can't be slow. So it made me understand why Nigerians are the way they are, because how do you survive in a jungle like this?
Yeah. What? Yeah. Otoma, may I ask an extra question that was not on?
Sure.
So Gilbert, with that in mind, what kind of microculture have you established in your family vis-a-vis the Lagosian culture?
Wow, that's a deep question right there. Whoa, I'm gonna have to reflect on that, but
Hmm.
I might not have thought about it consciously. Um, but I know that in the beginning, I think I had like a quiet resistance. So let me give you an example. You know that we are language people, right? We love to pick up languages. But I noticed that I think I resisted learning the Yoruba culture because I found it too aggressive. I found that there was a lot of cursing and stuff like that. And I think I quietly resisted some of that. I'm like, no, I don't want that. So I think I went through that stage of trying to resist some of those elements. Uh, and that probably consciously and unconsciously is also playing out within the family. Um, but there's still aspects of the culture here that still infiltrate. I know, for example, my wife had to, in the beginning, she and I will hit the road 5:30 in the morning. We're already out of the house to beat traffic, right? And so you're rushing out of the house. We're having our prayer and quiet time in the office. We'll go and park in front of my office and stay in the car. So there's a rushy culture in Lagos that sometimes affects even my family life, just because you got to try to meet up, and which I do regret at times. I do regret that we don't have at times enough time to pray and do some of the things we would love to do. So we try to use the weekends, we try to protect the weekends and do some good catch up because weekdays are really crazy.
No, that's good, and I think that's a good lesson for kind of all over the world. But here in the United States, we tend to have that type of rushy culture, especially in the big cities. Yeah, I grew up in New York, and so yes, it's familiar with what you're talking about, and it is important to consciously resist that and build in safeguards to slow things down and make sure you're spending quality time and that you're not and that you're also in control of your time as
That's
opposed
right.
to reacting to everything, because if you get reactive, there's always going to be things trying to take your time, impinge on your time, control your time for you. So yeah,
As I'm talking about quality time, I would just like to mention that we also try to take vacations. I know you and I have met on Bible study tours with my wife. I met your wife for the first time when we did Germany and Switzerland. So we always try to plan our vacation and take that time off because it's difficult to do that in this city of Lagos. So we do that. So right now we're already planning December, what we're going to do as a family. Before COVID, we went to Senegal. So we combined holiday and mission. The church was still encouraged that we're there. We're able to still create family time. So that's something we also consciously try to do.
Wow, that's really good. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to turn things over to Otoma.
Thank you. So I think with everything that's been shared so far, I think the thing that stands out to me is cultural competency in terms of, and I guess the specific question is, how have you individually and or as a church in Lagos worked through the dominant, non-dominant cultures to really be one family? What are some of the things that you guys have done?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. That's a great question. So I'll start by something as simple as when we have combined services in Lagos. We consciously will get a brother to pray in Hausa, a brother to pray in Igbo, a brother to pray Yoruba, So we try to bring in that. And it does create, I'll not understand everything that maybe the Yoruba brother is praying about. I'll pick a few things, but you sense the amens, the resonance from a cultural perspective from those who understand that language, whether it be Igbo, whether it be Hausa. We'll have traditional days where people dress in their traditional attires, and it's a way of displaying and accepting each other's cultural background. I think one of the blessings in the church is intermarriages. So it's always a shock in the world when you see somebody who is an Igbo get married to Yoruba, because those two tend to clash. Even from the cultural value system I described earlier on, they tend to clash. And so we have lots of that in the church. And so you have children growing up learning to merge those cultures. So from church events to family life marriages and so on, you find those cultures playing out. There's always something to look out for, actually, though. Maybe there'll be a question to that, but I want to mention that dominant, non-dominant, in leadership, you want to really watch out for things like tribalism. Those tribalistic tendencies that you see play out in the political arena, to be careful that is not imported into the church. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So do you also try to work to bring in into leadership, like the Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba? Because I think it seems like a perfect, trilateral or whatever, where, you have the entrepreneurial, let's do this. And
those different strengths, right, from different cultures.
How do you kind of work that through?
I think the beauty is that if I take the northern part of Nigeria, the bigger church there is a church in Abuja, for example. But the church in Abuja used to be led by a brother. We just lost a brother recently, Emeka, who is Igbo, more of the Igbo side. Emeka led that church for 10 years. And so, and he's that kind of person that will encourage people in their personal development, their jobs, their businesses, because he's got that in him. Right now, the church has been led for the past couple of years by Shadrach and his wife, Augusta. They are Yoruba, right? So this is Hausa land, but you're having leadership from the Igbo, from the Yoruba. So you see that mix is taking place right there. So I think in our leadership, we do have people from all those different cultures, and they're bringing their strengths. I think in that way, we're able to benefit from all the strengths from the different cultures.
Oh, man. And so you guys are, I guess, like yourself, I'm guessing they're also aware of, the strengths and weaknesses of each culture, so they can kind of fit together as a puzzle.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you that we, in growing in that awareness, there's always a need to also be aware of our prejudices.
Okay.
So, for example, there's a term that people use in the southern part of Nigeria to call people who are from the north. I recently learned that term, when it's used in Lagos, it is more derogatory.
Yeah.
But in the north, it actually means friend. Okay. So it actually means friend in the north. But here, the same word is used in a derogatory way. So it really takes being aware of those prejudices and letting go of them, and while adopting the strengths. I still admire even the Muslims for just their understanding of vanity of life, how they're quick at conducting burials, whereas in the southern part of Nigeria, people will keep a dead body for months and pay bills, to do the proper ceremony. They will go ahead and do the burial really quick, because they're like, from dusk we came and from dusk we're back. So they have this simplicity about the way they approach life. So there are strengths in both cultures to learn from. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So I'm sure you probably have heard on the interwebs that we're having fun here in America with some, I think as one person said, culture wars, what have you. But, you're obviously a teacher. You've been a disciple many, many years. So I think, in a sense, you've earned the right to be able to, share your opinions in that respect. So my question to you is, what advice would you give, disciples in America? And I know, again, we're kind of generalizing a little bit, but in reference to the primary thing right now has been the tension between blacks and whites. What would be some input you might give along those lines, assessing the issue, but also to bring us together as a unified body?
Wow, that's a big question. I can only share from my personal experiences, maybe like living in Europe as a Black person. So one thing that clearly stands out for me is the need to get to educate oneself, right, about other cultures.
Okay.
Be it through books, be it through travel. One of the reasons I love traveling is that it teaches you so much. Right. I just came back from Burundi, and the picture I had of Burundi before I went there, and what I experienced in Burundi is a complete I mean, it's a transformation. So I promised myself that I will never draw conclusions about any group of people or nation or country without having educated myself, and if possible, without having visited, because there's a lot of prejudice. We just, we take it from the TV, from the media, from all kinds of stuff, and we draw conclusions about people. So educating ourselves, learning other people's history, their culture, where they're coming from, it just really helps to enlighten. Living in Germany, I found that Germans who have traveled out of Germany are tend to be very friendly when they come back home, because they've experienced so much hospitality and warmth when they go out, and they've realized that the world does not limit itself within Germany. There's still so much more of the world out there. And when they come back, they want to give back.
That's awesome.
And so I tend to think that a lot of the, whether you call it racism, whatever you name you choose to call it, I think a lot of it comes from just ignorance and limitations in not educating ourselves about other people and their history. So I would say seek to understand before being understood, which is a principle we teach and we apply in marriage, we apply in so many relationships. We can apply that same principle in the cultural realm. So these are some general principles I just wanted to share.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned Michael Burns. I think he's also helped to enlighten us about becoming culturally competent to navigate a lot of the challenges that we face. So thank you for that. So as we kind of come to a close a little bit here, I know you are one of a number of teachers in Africa, and I'm very excited again to have you on the program today, because we don't want to, even as a church, have like a colonial type of mindset where we're just kind of, coming into countries. But it's great to see, people such as yourself, and we've done this, I think, in other places where we want, nationals to raise up and really just, for them to really just own their countries and it not necessarily be us only in that respect. So I'm definitely very excited about that. Can you maybe share a little bit about, I guess, your expertise as far as teaching, or like your focus or interest, and maybe about the other teachers, where they are throughout Africa, and maybe their focus or interest or that kind of a thing?
Yeah, thanks for that. So we do have like an African teacher service group. We're 15 of us.
Okay.
So 3 from English West Africa, 3 from French Africa, 4 from Eastern Africa, where I just came back from. I met one of them in Uganda, Richard Ahenda. So there are 4 of them who are appointed in East Africa. And then we do have 5 in Southern Africa. So that makes a group of 15. And a couple of others are rising up. I'm sure we'll have 1 or 2 more appointments very soon. In terms of expertise, of course, Christ and culture is definitely an area of passion for me. In terms of my life experience, born in Cameroon, like Joe said, which is the merging of English and French culture, or colonial culture, whatever you call it. Then Germany, which is just another real cultural exposure there for my university days. And then coming back to the continent and living much more deeply in French Africa through Abidjan. So Christ and culture is definitely an area. I believe that it's important for missions that we're able to grow in that competency of becoming all things to all people, like Paul will talk about in 1 Corinthians. I've seen that missionary efforts that have succeeded partly because the leaders who led those missions were culturally competent. They were culturally flexible in the way they brought the gospel to those places. And where people have not been that competent, it has affected even the growth of the mission. So that's definitely one of my areas. I do have a lot of interest also, some in apologetics, because of where I became a disciple in Europe. I had to quickly study books like, I still remember the book in German, The Bibel im Test. Is that by this guy? What do you call it in English again? Evidence that demands a verdict, something like that.
Josh McDowell.
Yeah,
Josh McDowell.
Exactly. So I read that book really early on as a young disciple, because in Germany you have to defend your faith.
You were pretty deep as a young disciple.
Okay, there we go. So I mentioned that to you earlier on. So I read those books. I didn't know. I just read them because I needed them to cope with cancer, to cope with Europe, the atheistic mindset in Europe.
Right.
And so from that background, apologetics and church history and stuff, I've been to Israel, to Greece, to Turkey with Joy, because I want to learn that background in terms of being able to teach based on apologetics, proving that what we teach in the Bible is true. So that's something I'm interested in. That's my connection with Jacoby, for example. And then the third area, which is more of the influence, I think, of Dr. Steve Kennard, is just he's gotten me to just love Jesus, topics around Jesus, be it the gospel, anything that rotates around Jesus is something that's really impacted me. So I'm still navigating kind of like between those three. And over time, I believe it will become clearer which one will really be the dominant one. But I'm kind of like in that triangle. So right now, even for us as a group of 15 teachers, we do have 4 projects we're working on. So I'm working on the project that involves Christ and culture and how we can adopt the gospel to our African context. How we can,
Awesome.
exactly. So that's something we're working on. I'm working on that with 3 other brothers, Soli in South Africa and Julius in East Africa. We're working on that. There's a group working on marriage, divorce, marriage, and remarriage. So there's a group of brothers working on that. Neil, Fred George, a couple of brothers are working on a topic like that, which is becoming more and more of a need. And so you will see that people who have a particular interest navigate towards a particular topic.
So as we wrap it up here, can you just share a little bit about your ministry in closing? I know you shared a little bit already, but how can people find out more about you and get in touch with you and so forth?
What has happened, especially in the past couple of years, 3 years, you still hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes. So the past 4 years, actually, 2017. So I worked on the church staff for 13 years while on French Africa, Abidjan. And then I resigned and went back to school, got a degree in communication, public relations and stuff. And then ended up working in the telecom and IT industry, more like a program manager. And then lost my job in 2017 after a couple of years. And from that moment on, I think my teaching ministry took a new turn in that I became a lot more available. So in the past 4 years, I've gone on average, pre-COVID, I went to, for 3 years, 2018, 2017, 18, 19, I went to an average of 10 countries, 15 churches every year across Africa.
Okay.
And so got to use my language skills, my people and cultural skills to teach. So that's what really characterized my teaching ministry. And then COVID came and I had to now learn to use technology, which was not really me, but I had to learn it to be able to stay in touch with those churches that I've visited and also start teaching other churches I've not taught at all. So Burundi, for example, I never taught Burundi. I did it online last year and I visited them just this past week. I did Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and I was planning to visit them. I had a visa issue. So on average, I went from 10 countries, 15 churches in visits to now something like 20 countries, 30 churches online last year. And something similar this year. I've done a few physical visits this year, but I've had to learn to use technology. So that kind of like defines what I've been doing, but I tend to have a preference for the smaller churches. I feel like big churches get a lot of visits. Big churches have a lot of resources on ground, but the smaller churches really are often depleted and need encouragement and teaching. So I just came back from Burundi, which is a small church. The last time they got a visit was almost 3 years ago, early 2019 probably. And then I'm planning to go to Chad in November, Jamina, Chad. Planning to go to Bangui, Central African Republic. These guys rarely get any visit in years. So that is more of my primary focus If you look at my website, you see taking God's word to remote places and breaking new frontiers. Because I feel like there's a lot of saturation in the bigger churches, and we need to give attention to the smaller churches and to the places that need encouragement. Yeah,
that's awesome. And your website is Gilbert Kimeng. I think you're still buffering. What's your website? I'm sorry.
Yes, so gilbertkimeng.com.
Okay.
www.gilbert. Yeah, exactly. gilbertkimeng.com. Correct.
Okay, I'll try to put that in the show notes. What I wanted to do now is switch gears a little bit, and I'll have myself and Joey just share a few words just of encouragement just for your ministry, and then we have the lightning round. You want to start out, Joey?
Sure. Well, I just want to encourage you, Gilbert. As you know, I have really been impressed with you over the entire time that I've known you. From the very first time that we met, you were very open, very humble, very welcoming and giving of your own life, to me. And then I appreciate what you were just sharing about your ministry. That's actually what I was going to share, is that you travel to a lot of places, especially the places that other people don't go, and that you've really made it your mission to reach out to and help teach those who don't get a lot of visitors. And I am similar, and so I really appreciate that. I that means a lot to me, because it's those, a lot of people don't realize it, but the bulk of the disciples in our movement are in small little churches like that. There's a whole lot of them. Most of our churches are small little churches just like that. But people, usually think of the big city churches, and that's all they get in their head. Even in those states where those big city churches are, there's usually several little bitty itty churches somewhere in that state that nobody ever thinks about. So I really, it means a lot to me that you do that. And it says a lot about your heart. It says a lot about what you value and who you value and why. So I just wanted to encourage you to keep on doing that. And that, I know for a fact that means the world to the people that you're teaching. And it also means a lot to people like me that see you doing that from afar. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Joy. And thank you for even helping. I mean, you guys know Gusta, I remember, supported me to go visit some of those churches. Even Kinshasa, for example, when I visited Kinshasa 2015, you guys supported that. And they had not had visits in, I don't know for how long. It's only since then that John Oakes, I did organize a trip for him to go, I think 2 years later. And then I went with Jacoby the following year. And it's like the world opens up and they realize they're part of a bigger global family. So thanks for the support from the Augusta Church to even visit some of those. And I always appreciate any support, because it does take support. Going to those places, they can't host you. They don't have the means, so it takes that kind of support to be able to make it happen.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, I think for me, I love to read. So just hearing how much you read as a young disciple just inspired me. And I think as I, got to learn a little bit more about you just by reading different things online, even as was shared, you're someone who, to me, it's like the quiet of the land, who you're not this showy kind of a guy. You're just doing what you need to do, but you do it with great heart. And I know when I read some of your blogs, just to hear your heart and watch some of, as I watched some of your videos, I think you were sharing about how you were in Abidjan and you were in one of the one of the buildings that the church was in, and you just went back there, during the COVID times, just kind of reflecting, and just to see your heart just blew me away. I think that teachers are very important in so many ways. I think teachers with heart are just, we need that, and, to me, I think a teacher with heart that's also humble is just gold. And, I just see that, in you. So I look forward to getting to know you more. And I'm excited that you're serving in the country, of my my dad's birth, which is my country too, Nigeria. So I'm very excited about that.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Look at that. I didn't know that.
My dad is from Warri. All right, you ready for the lightning round?
Don't tell me that. I visited the church in Warri. Come on, man. Let's go. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that personal aspect of yourself.
Yeah,
I'm
we'll
ready.
talk. We'll talk. All right, first one. What's your favorite type of food?
Wow, I love vegetables any day, anytime. So I love combining vegetables in Africa. We got lots of it, green, all kinds. They have all kinds of names. I love combining that with different things, either with fufu, which is based on corn, or with yam. Yam is a form of root plant, you know.
Yeah.
So, but vegetables along with any of those is something I love. Yeah.
Okay, so not piri piri.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you.
All
Yeah,
right,
because, I think maybe because I'm a rural guy. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite film or series?
Oh my goodness. So after I'd admit to you that I've not been very good with films and movies of late.
That's fine.
But once you mention movies, movies like Braveheart come to mind, right? I tend to love biographies or real stories that are transformed into movies. I tend to connect with those more. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. What's your favorite book of the Bible?
Oh boy, it changes with time. Oh my goodness. So in the last couple of years, it's been Romans and Ephesians, kind of those two. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, that's an amazing book. I mean, there's so much depth to Romans. All right. Who's your favorite character in the Bible?
Joseph was the very first one as a young disciple. I loved his purity. I loved his, for a good part of my life as a young disciple. I think Paul kind of like took over. David in between, but I think Paul has taken a good part of it.
Okay. You can't go wrong with Joseph, that's for sure. And Paul, yeah, he's right up there. All right, outside of the Bible, what's your favorite book or author?
Outside of the Bible, favorite book or author? Man, it's a difficult question. At some point, I read lots of motivational books, right? Read quite a bit from even John Maxwell books. When I was trying to cope with transitioning from being on staff to go into the corporate world, I read lots of books in terms of managing that transition and that change. So even books like Who Moved My Cheese, a simple, small book.
Yeah.
But it did me so much good. So that category of books, lots of them, but that's just one example.
Okay. So what book do you think everyone should read in the next 12 months?
Oh boy. In the next 12 months, what book do I think people should read? Because I'm in that mode of how do we manage transitions? Is it COVID? There are just so many changes going on, right?
Sure.
So I recommend any book around that, how to manage different changes. I've been teaching lessons on serving God in the different seasons of our life. So something as simple as that. If you've not read Who Moved My Cheese, it will take you 1 hour to read that book. If you sit down and read through it, but I'm telling you, it has helped me manage a lot of changes I've been going through as a person. Simple, you can do it.
What would you say is the most important theological book in the last 50 years? These questions get easier and easier, right?
Oh my goodness, that's a very difficult one, honestly. That's a really, if I have to be honest, I need time to think more about that. But recently I started doing a podcast series on Jesus the Saint, and
I was just
because
thinking that
I see the need to. Okay, there we go. I see the need to center on Jesus. It's so easy to veer off to so many other things, but any book that brings me back to Jesus, I think it's a good place to be. Yeah.
Have you ever read Thomas à Kempis, The Imitation of Christ?
So I followed Jacoby's podcast series when he did that. but I would love to take time and do the reading of the book myself.
It's very good. And then another oldie but goodie, Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence of God.
You shared that about that book to me. I think I got to know about that book from you for the first time.
Yes. So read it now.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy.
What's your favorite place to live, and where would you most want to visit?
Oh, difficult question. Where to live? I've navigated that question for a long time, and I've drawn the conclusion that anywhere in Africa, I'm good. I think I love being in Africa. I love being on the continent. So that would be my general question. Answer to the question. Specific as to which part of Africa. There have been times I thought South Africa, East Africa. I'm currently in West. I used to be in French. So anywhere around Africa, but I think I'm rooted on the continent. I love going out, but I love living on the continent. And the next question was?
Yeah, you answered it. You answered it. Where would you most like to visit? Where would you most like to visit?
I think right now I love to visit countries in Asia. I've never been to Asia. If you call Turkey Asia Minor, okay, fine. But what I mean by Asia is like the Japans, the China, the typical Malaysia. I find them really exotic. I would love to make that experience, to have that experience.
Okay. If you were to place a billboard in the middle of Lagos or in Lagos, what would it say?
It will simply say, "This is Lagos. You take it or you leave it."
Okay. And
That's the spirit of Lagos.
I think Lagos says that all by itself. No billboard required.
Yeah.
You don't need to add the writing on it, right?
That's right.
All right. Last one is what's your favorite music?
Oh, my favorite music. I think lately, music for me is a bit like it changes over time. But lately, on the flight, for example, back from East Africa, I listen mostly to instrumental jazz for some reason.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I definitely appreciate your time. It's been a true honor just to have you on. I'm excited for what's happening in Africa through you, other teachers and other ministries. I think you really helped us understand some of the different nuances about working through cultural competency and what that looks like as far as how to bring unity, which is something we're striving for here in America. I also think a lot of us look at Africa and we think it's all kind of the same, but to hear like those different nuances, to go, wow, there's a lot of texture, a lot of variation, a lot of beauty when you all bring it together and let all the different strengths flourish, understanding how everything fits together. So thank you for that.
That is so well said. Thanks for having me, Otoma.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Joy.
Enjoy the episode. Please consider subscribing and sharing with your friends. Amen.